The bathroom door swings open, and what Dr. Kent Driscoll sees inside stops him cold. His roommate, a young doctor, a man who had dedicated his entire life to healing children, is folded head first into the bathtub, bound, stabbed, strangled, beaten with such savage, methodical fury that when the medical examiner later tries to determine what actually killed him, he can't. Because everything killed him. The knives, the cord, the toilet tank lid, shattered into pieces and used as a weapon. A fire iron dragged up from downstairs, also broken from the force of the blows. And then there's the mask, a carved wooden Caribbean mask placed deliberately near the body, its eyes stabbed out, just like the victims. Dr. Kent Driscoll doesn't even stop to call the police from inside the house. He runs. He sprints to his car, drives to the nearest police station, and bursts through the door screaming, "My roommate's been murdered." This is the story of Dr. Jeffrey Farkas, a 26-year-old pediatric intern who moved to Pittsburgh because he thought it was safe. A man who didn't have a single enemy in the world. A man who came home on the wrong night and walked straight into a monster. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. December 1989. If you've never experienced a Pittsburgh winter, understand this. It doesn't just get cold. It gets cruel. The kind of bitter, bone-deep cold that sinks into your marrow and makes you question every life choice that led you to this moment, standing on a frozen sidewalk wondering why you ever left the house. Wind chills that drag temperatures below zero. Heavy snow that turns the city's rolling hills into something ancient and isolated. But in 1989, Pittsburgh was fighting back against its reputation. The steel mills that once defined the city had collapsed, leaving behind the rusted skeleton of an industrial era. The Rust Belt. The has-been. But Pittsburgh refused to accept that label. It was transforming, slowly, painfully, into a hub of education, medicine, and technology. And at the center of that transformation stood Children's Hospital. A jewel, a beacon, one of the most prestigious pediatric medical centers in the country, where cutting-edge research was being done and where the best young medical minds in America came to prove themselves. One of those minds belonged to Dr. Jeffrey Farkas, 26 years old, fresh out of Wayne State University's medical school in Michigan. Bright, warm, infectious. The kind of person who walked into a room and immediately made you feel like you'd known him your whole life. His father remembers the day Jeff called him and said simply, "Dad, I want to be a doctor." It caught him off guard. But Jeff had been working with kids, and he'd discovered something about himself. He had a gift. He wanted to be a pediatrician. After medical school, Jeff did a rotation at a Detroit emergency room. Detroit in the late 1980s was a city drowning in violent crime. Jeff saw it every shift. The gunshot wounds, the trauma cases, the endless human cost of a city at war with itself. Then one night, walking out of the hospital with friends, they were mugged. His friend was shot. That was enough. Jeff Farkas started looking for somewhere safer. Somewhere he could actually heal people instead of watching the city create new patients faster than the hospitals could treat them. Pittsburgh had the reputation. Pittsburgh had Children's Hospital. Pittsburgh, with only 24 homicides in all of 1988, a city where detectives claimed they solved every single one, seemed like exactly the kind of place a young doctor could build a life. So Jeff applied. Jeff got in. And Jeff moved to a rented house on Beechwood Boulevard in Squirrel Hill, one of Pittsburgh's quietest, most residential neighborhoods, with 2 roommates, both also doctors. And there is tremendous irony in that. He came to a place he thought was safe, and that's where he died. It's a Sunday night. Frigid, dark, the kind of evening that drives most people indoors and keeps them there. Jeff is home. He's warm. He's settled in for the night. And then his phone rings. A friend is stranded nearby. At a restaurant in Squirrel Hill. Battery dead. Car won't start. Can Jeff come give him a jump? Of course he can. That was just who Jeff Farkas was. You called him, even on a freezing Sunday night when he was already home and comfortable, and he'd say, "Yeah, I'll be there in 10 minutes. He pulls on his coat, grabs his keys, the keys to his 1989 Acura, and heads out into the cold. He helps his friend. He drives home, and somewhere in that ordinary, generous act, that small, selfless favor on a winter Sunday, the clock on Jeff Farkas's life begins its final countdown. His roommate, Dr. Kent Driscoll, comes home a little after 4 in the morning. He immediately notices something wrong. The lights are on upstairs in Jeff's room. That's unusual. It's past 4 a.m. But what really unsettles Kent is what's missing. Jeff's car. It's not outside. The front door is open a crack. Kent pushes it open, calls out, "Jeff?" The house is wrong. Things are out of place. And then Kent walks into the kitchen, and his stomach drops. Jeff's wallet is on the floor. His driver's license, his credit cards, scattered. And next to the wallet, a bloody knife. Kent grabs something to protect himself. He's a doctor, not a fighter, but he grabs something, anything, and starts moving through the house, up the stairs, down the hall. He pushes open the bathroom door. What he finds inside is so horrific that he doesn't even stop to use the phone inside the house. He runs. He drives. He bursts into the Zone 6 Pittsburgh police station, screaming. Within minutes, the entire homicide squad is called out, the entire mobile crime unit. Officers flood the scene, clear the house room by room. No one is there. And then the real work begins. Even for veteran homicide detectives, men who had seen the worst Pittsburgh had to offer. This was something else entirely. Jeff Farkas had been picked up and driven headfirst into the bathtub. His head was cocked down. His feet were sticking out of the tub. He was bound. He had been strangled with a cord that had been cut from the vacuum cleaner in the house. He had been stabbed. And the stabbing, 4 knives, a pair of scissors, one knife bent from force, another broken. The killer used them on Jeff's chest, his neck, his head, and his eyes. 3 wounds to each eye. But the killer didn't stop there. The toilet tank lid had been shattered into pieces and used as a weapon. A fire iron, dragged up from downstairs, had been brought to the bathroom and used with such force that it broke. The medical examiner would later say that the damage to Jeff's body was comparable to someone who had been killed in a high-speed automobile collision. That's how brutal it was. So brutal that the coroner couldn't even determine a single cause of death. It was attributable to blunt force trauma, strangulation, and stabbing. Any one of those 3 would have been fatal. And then there was the cord around Jeff's neck. It wasn't a simple knot. It wasn't the kind of knot you'd tie in a shoelace or a necktie. It was complex, deliberate, specifically trained. Investigators took one look at it and immediately asked themselves, what kind of person learns a knot like that? And the mask. A carved wooden Caribbean mask, a childhood gift that Jeff's parents had brought back for him from a trip to Nassau, something he kept close to him, in his bedroom. The killer had taken it and placed it near the body. And in the eyes of the mask, stab wounds, matching the wounds in Jeff's own eyes. One detective said it felt like a message, like whoever did this was saying, You're not going to identify me. There's no one to identify me. The investigators called it overkill. That word barely touches it. Police knew they needed to move fast. They put out an APB on Jeff's missing Acura, broadcasting its description to state police in Maryland, West Virginia, Ohio, and New York every hour. They called Jeff's family. His great-aunt, who lived in the city, heard on the news that a young doctor on Beechwood Boulevard in Squirrel Hill had been murdered. She knew Jeff was a young doctor on Beechwood Boulevard in Squirrel Hill. She and Jeff's uncle raced to the scene, and somewhere in Florida, Jeff's father picked up the phone. His brother didn't pull any punches. "Cherry, hey, Jeff's dead." One of the worst things that can happen in this world is the death of a child. Because it's against nature. A child is not supposed to die before you. Jeff's father, a man named Cherry Farkas, would spend the rest of that morning asking the same question that had no answer. Why Jeff? Meanwhile, detectives began the grim work of eliminating suspects. In any homicide, you start with the people closest to the victim. Jeff had 2 roommates. Both were doctors. Kent Driscoll, the one who found the body, and Donovan Lintz. Kent's story had complications. His fingerprints were found on one of the knives at the scene. He explained it, said he'd picked up the knife after entering the house because he was scared. Plausible, but also exactly what someone who put a knife there would say. His alibi had gaps. He had worked late at the hospital, then gone home, but the timeline wasn't airtight. There were minutes unaccounted for, and detectives noted he could have driven home, committed the murder, and driven back to the hospital before anyone missed him. Why didn't he call from inside the house? Why run to the station instead? But then, investigators checked. They talked to people. His whereabouts were verified. Kent Driscoll was cleared. Donovan Lintz had been with his girlfriend for almost the entire night. He was eliminated quickly. As dawn broke on that Monday morning, forensic technicians made a discovery in the snow outside the house. Shoe impressions, 3-dimensional, with depth, with a clear pattern. Carefully, using a chemical spray to set the mold before the heat of the casting material could melt the snow, technicians preserved them. Size 13, large, larger than Jeff's shoes, larger than either roommate's. And then came something else. A call that had come in the night before. A resident near Beechwood Boulevard had reported a suspicious man, tall, young, African-American, wearing an army coat with a hoodie, carrying a dark knapsack. He'd knocked on a neighbor's door asking for a woman named Cindy. A classic burglar's trick. Knock on a darkened house, make up a name. If someone answers, you say you have the wrong address. If no one answers you, try the door. One neighbor watched him walk down her steps and turn left toward Jeff's house. The second neighbor was suspicious enough to call the police. A patrolman was dispatched. He found shoe impressions going around the back of the house. But by the time he searched the area, the man was gone. And somewhere inside that house on Beechwood Boulevard, Jeff Farkas was already dead. Detectives compared the shoe impressions from the neighbor's yard to those in Jeff's yard. They matched. This is our guy, the most promising lead they had. They built a composite sketch, a tall black man in an army jacket with a hood and a dark backpack. Then the APB paid off. Jeff's Acura was found the next morning, 3 miles away, in a town called Homestead, just across the Monongahela River. Technicians rushed to the scene, and in the snow around the car, more footwear impressions, matching the ones from the house. The car was processed for fingerprints, fibers, anything. Nothing useful came back, but the location was a clue in itself. Whoever abandoned the car here in the bitter cold, in the dead of a Pittsburgh winter, probably didn't walk far. Detectives began canvassing. They contacted every bus driver on duty that night, every cab company. Nothing. And then one detective had a simple human thought. In that cold, this person had to stop somewhere. They pulled into the first fast food restaurant past the Homestead high-level bridge. The manager remembered a man. He remembered him specifically because of how tall he was. Backpack, army jacket, hood up. He'd ordered a triple cheeseburger, paid cash, and walked out into the cold. No security camera. The pressure inside the Pittsburgh Police Department was immense. Vacation days canceled. Days off canceled. 6 additional detectives pulled from burglary, robbery, and mobile crime, and assigned temporarily to homicide. Every fingerprint in Jeff Farkas's house, hundreds of them, was identified one by one, all but one. A partial thumbprint on the bathroom door. One unusual characteristic, a straight, horizontal line across the bottom. The fingerprint technician's theory, whoever left this print was wearing a Band-Aid on that finger at the time. But in 1989, automated fingerprint databases weren't online yet. Matching that print meant finding the person first. Investigators had also called the FBI. The crime scene was too unusual, too specific, to handle without behavioral science support. They told an FBI criminal profiler everything. The overkill, the knots, the mask, the eyes. The profiler couldn't connect the attack to any known recent crimes. But what he told them next was chilling. Catch him, because he's probably done it before, and he'll do it again. Tips flooded in after the composite was released, and the $20,000 reward was announced. Detectives chased every one. 2 men in particular drew serious attention. Lucas Hillman, a violent career criminal with a history of armed robbery and burglary who was spotted near where Jeff's car was found, and Jamal Jackson, a man who matched the physical description almost perfectly, habitually wore a backpack and had a green army jacket and a history with a woman named Cindy. Both were brought in. Both provided alibis. Both alibis checked out. Hillman's fingerprints didn't match the bathroom door. Jackson's shoe size didn't match the prints. Dead ends. Both of them. Detectives went back to the witnesses from the fast food restaurant, and in that second round of interviews, something shifted. When the investigators had originally asked how tall the man was, they'd assumed the witnesses meant 6'3", maybe 6'4". But when pressed again, the witnesses clarified, "No, not that tall. We mean tall like the center of a basketball team. 6'7", 6'8". Something like that. That changed everything. Detectives contacted the parole office and asked for a list of anyone recently released from prison in the Duquesne Homestead Monongahela area. The list was long, hundreds of names. So they made a decision. They cut it in half. They would only look at men who were 6'5" and above. They started reading, and then they stopped. William Yarbo, 24 years old, 6 feet 8 inches tall, recently paroled, convicted of burglary in the same general area. His last known location, Homestead. A detective pulled his photograph. As soon as I saw his picture, I told my partner, "This is him." They drew a hood on the photograph. It looked exactly like the composite. And then they pulled his fingerprint card. They held it next to the partial thumbprint from the bathroom door. The straight line. The unusual characteristic. It matched. We got him. We got him. We got him. William Yarbo was working as a cook at a fast food restaurant not far from Jeff Farkas's house. Detectives drove there, went inside, and asked if he could step outside. He did. They took him into custody without incident. Then they searched his locker, but he didn't have one. His belongings were kept in a communal area, and sitting right there in plain sight was a pair of size 13 shoes. "Who do these belong to?" a detective asked the manager. "William Yarbo," she said. The sole pattern matched perfectly to the impressions left in the snow outside Jeff Farkas's house, matched to the impressions by the abandoned car in Homestead. And when technicians examined the shoes more carefully, they found something on one of them that sealed the case forever: Jeffrey Farkas's blood. When Yarbo was brought in, detectives noticed one more thing: a Band-Aid on one of his fingers. Exactly where the fingerprint technician had predicted months earlier, based on that strange line across the partial thumbprint. And then investigators started learning who William Yarbo actually was. As a young man, he had been sent to a camp for troubled youth. One of the things they taught at that camp was knot tying, and one specific type of knot they taught, a complex, deliberate, specialized knot, was the exact same knot found around Jeff Farkas's neck. And the mask, the stabbed eyes, the theatrical, horrifying display of it all. Yarbo was obsessed with slasher films, specifically with Freddy Krueger. He had absorbed that fictional violence, that over-the-top, symbolic, cinematic brutality, and on the night of December 3rd, 1989, he had acted it out on a real human being. Prosecutors laid out the full picture at trial. Yarbo had been moving through the Squirrel Hill neighborhood that night, knocking on doors, checking for empty houses to burglarize. The Cindy story. The classic trick. When someone answered, he moved on. When no one answered, he tried the door. Jeff's house. The latch wasn't fully closed. Someone had simply forgotten to lock it. Yarbo walked in, began ransacking the house, found the VCR, the CD player, the telephone, the answering machine, the 35mm camera. And then Jeff came home. He'd just been out helping a friend with a dead battery. A small, selfless, ordinary act of kindness. And he walked through his own front door into a nightmare. Yarbo acted on his darkest impulses. Detectives believed he got some kind of emotional high from what he did, that each act of violence fed the next, that he grew more comfortable with it with every passing minute. That's why investigators had no doubt. Given the chance, he would have killed again. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. On December 3rd, 1990, exactly 1 year to the day after the murder, William Yarbo was convicted of robbery, burglary, and first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Jeff's father was in the courtroom. "I was elated. I was happy they caught him. I'm glad he's off the streets, that he can't do this to anybody else." He paused. "But my feeling was, this is not going to bring my son back." The last time Cherry Farkas saw his son alive, Jeff had just received his medical degree from Wayne State. His father had flown back to Florida for work, and he was looking forward, truly looking forward, to the day he could visit Pittsburgh, to see Jeff at Children's Hospital, to watch him work, to see what kind of doctor his son had become. He never got that chance. Children's Hospital established the Jeffrey Farkas Award, given annually to the top intern who demonstrates the greatest compassion toward patients and their families. The award still exists. It still carries his name. And the people who knew Jeff Farkas, who worked beside him, who were treated by him, who called him a friend, they still talk about him the same way. Not because it's polite to speak well of the dead, but because it was true. Every word of it. He really didn't have an enemy in the world. There is a photograph that one of his colleagues keeps. Jeff took it himself, at an intern retreat. A selfie before the word existed. A wide grin, mischievous eyes, a look that somehow manages to be both completely at peace and completely alive at the same time. "That grin," she says, says everything about who he was and everything about what the world lost on a cold Sunday night in Pittsburgh. Jeffrey Farkas came to Pittsburgh to save children's lives. He was 26 years old. He had his whole career ahead of him. The patients he would have treated, the children he would have comforted, the lives he would have saved. A man whose gift was making scared kids feel safe in the one place that frightened them most. He was killed because he forgot to lock his front door. And the man who killed him, a man obsessed with fictional monsters, turned out to be exactly the kind of monster that even the FBI's best behavioral scientists feared most. One who had almost certainly done it before. One who would absolutely have done it again. The FBI profiler's words still echo. Catch him, because he's done it before, and he'll do it again. They caught him, but not before Pittsburgh learned a brutal lesson about the men who walk quietly through quiet streets in the dark, carrying a backpack, wearing a hood, looking for a door that someone forgot to lock. Sleep well tonight. If this story stayed with you, it should. Share it with someone who needs to hear it.